This is Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy. Dr. Murphy is a licensed psychologist who has helped individuals understand the human mind and behavior since 1985. Throughout his distinguished career, he has worked in community mental health, correctional psychology, and behavioral health leadership, giving him a unique perspective on both the challenges and the resilience of the human experience. In addition to his clinical work, Dr. Murphy is an accomplished author of Opiate Odyssey and contributed to multi-million seller Chicken Soup for the Soul. He is also a poet and philosopher whose writings have explored the intersection of psychology, personal growth, and the human spirit. Please welcome Dr. Michael Murphy.
Did you choose this life? And who defined your identity? Can you outgrow your past? We don't choose the circumstances of which we're born into, or many of the events that shape us. However, through awareness, acceptance, meaning, and deliberate action, we can influence the person we become. Welcome to Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy, the program where psychology, philosophy, consciousness, and the deeper question of human existence comes together. I'm Dr. Gloria Warren, and our topic today is Thrownness, the Unchosen Life, 8 Steps to Move Beyond. And here's the man of the hour to talk about this, Dr. Michael Murphy.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you again today, and we're really going into the deep waters with all the powerful questions today. We're really going to answer the fundamental questions about the nature of existence and all the meaning of life and all those interesting philosophical questions. I can let you know that, as we've probably shared before, I majored in philosophy in college just because I loved it. And I love the process of seeking to understand, the meaning of life and why we're here and all those things. And those are exactly the questions that we're going to be addressing and hopefully even solving to some extent
Oh,
today.
that would be nice.
Yeah.
Uh, but we're not, there's a lot of things we're going to go into. And I love that we're going to do this 8 steps to moving beyond. So if you've keyed into this show, please don't leave it. You're going to love these 8 steps. I was amazed when I read them and so graciously thankful for these 8 steps. So we just let's just go into like the first segment here. So what is thrownness, Dr. Murphy?
Thrownness is an existential concept, one of the fundamental concepts of what we call existential philosophy. Now, people can remember that after the First World War, really, that was the first time that humanity really encountered what we call mechanized warfare, when there were machines and planes and all kinds of automated sources of violence that were utilized in the course of that war, in which something around the nature of 30 million people were killed. So it really was a horrendous time when people were examining, what is going on here? What is the meaning of life?
Mhm.
Why do we even exist if all that happens is that we go off here and we get trained as soldiers and we run over a hill and have to deal with the maelstrom of modern warfare. So a lot of people were asking that question, what is it? What does it mean to be alive? And what does it mean to live at this point, this moment of time? And people were understanding that they didn't feel like they had any sense of what we call agency, that they could make a choice. They had to participate in this thing we call warfare. And they had to enlist in the army and they had to go to the front and they had to face combat and all the fear and terror and woundedness that involved. And so they really had this sense that was called in philosophy thrownness. We didn't really make a choice to have this destiny, but we have it.
Yeah.
And so the thrownness is the concept of to what extent we find ourselves in situations uh, where we really never made a choice to be there or not, but we find ourselves thrown there. For example, what kind of family we were born into. We didn't really choose the country that we're born in, the family that we're born into, the nature of that family, the history of that family. So we're kind of thrown into that situation as small, vulnerable human beings. And that's the situation that we grow up in. And we're going to talk about a wonderful book that really deals with that issue called The Family Crucible, and seeing the family as that situation that we are thrown into. We're sort of thrown into the
Mhm.
family. We grew up in an Irish Catholic immigrant family. Well, that had lots of significance, just being there. And I'll talk about all those things. Every one of us, though, was thrown into some kind of situation simply by
Mm.
virtue of the family that we were born into and the qualities and strengths and deficits that family may have had.
Yeah. I love that you said thrown into, hence thrownness.
Right.
It actually
Okay.
helps me remember that word and on how you said the family. So the family, the culture, and the history, like you said, warfare. Sometimes you just are thrown into it, into these circumstances that describe the reality that you find yourself placed into a world that you did not design. So it's fascinating topic actually. Heidegger's broad idea of being in the world means human beings don't develop in isolation. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, or you know?
Right. Martin Heidegger was a very eminent German philosopher of the
Hmm.
phenomenological school. So if you Google phenomenological philosophy, Martin Heidegger's name will pop up, and the kind of philosophy that he talked about. He was a real
Hmm.
existential philosopher. He wrote a book, uh, believe it or not, called "What Does It Mean to Be?" So this is one of the fundamental existential and philosophical questions, of course. What is the meaning of being? The fact that I'm here in the world, in this, thrown into this situation, what does it mean to be here now? And so he was the person who really wrote extensively about this.
Hmm.
Um, and he taught, for years and years in Germany, and was very involved in teaching philosophy during the World War I and World War II period. So he was directly confronted with, all of the influences of World War II and Europe during that period of time.
So with the idea of thrownness, this obviously happens when you're born. You're like thrown into these circumstances of which, you have to live out certain periods of time in your life. But what will this type of environment you're thrown into may teach a child?
Right. So one of the fundamental issues that all of us have to deal with is sort of the effects of the situation where we were born and where we grew up, right? So there's lots of research out there and interesting stuff on the internet that talks about how families interact with children when they're very young, when you might
Hmm.
be an infant, just a few months old, sitting in a high chair, and how does the mother or father interact with that child
Hmm.
has a tremendous influence on the development of that child's personality. Does that child believe that the world is safe, that it's going to be fed when it needs food and is hungry, and is going to be held when the child needs to be held? Is the child going to be stimulated and given activities that are fun when it's seeking that kind of stimulation? And therefore, that contributes hugely to the child's growth. The quality and the kind of attention that a child receives when the child is very young. So once again, we didn't choose the situation that we're thrown into. Maybe the parent figures who we find ourselves cared for by are not very skilled at taking care of a young and vulnerable child. And that affects our
Right,
personality.
right.
So therefore we grow up and we're anxious. We're kind of nervous about, are we going to
Yeah.
get the, are, are our fundamental needs going to be met? Are we going to be safe? Are we going to be loved? Those are
Hmm.
fundamental things that it's just remarkable to see how very young children, even just 3 months old, 6 months old, 1 year old, how powerfully the environment affects the formation of their sense of self-control and calmness and all of
Yeah.
the kind of internal states that they are learning to regulate when they are very, very, very young. So yeah,
Hmm.
that is this fundamental concept of thrownness. We didn't ask for the parents that we have or the family that we have, but they're the ones who are
Yep.
teaching us about the world and the nature of it.
It kind of reminds me of like inner city Chicago children. They learn from a very young age that the world may not be a safe place and it can be dangerous. And I know like some adults, the ones that were coddled, a couple of them that I know were coddled when they were children. They feel so free and they go all over the world. And I'm I would tell them things because I grew up in Chicago, and I would tell them things like, you have to be careful. Well, what do you mean? And I'm like, and I have to explain things to them. Be cautious where you go, who you talk to, stay with the resort and things like that. And then they get there and they always tell me when they come back, I'm glad you told me that because I never thought of it. And to me, it was like secondhand, second nature. You don't you cross a street, you run across the street in Chicago where if you're in the suburbs or something, you don't need to do that. But different ways that people are thrown in different environments obviously do affect their identity and their belief system and their id in general, their internal being. So I see how that applies. Um, I do
Exactly. I mean,
appreciate that.
sorry to interrupt, but it sounds like
Mhm.
you were raised in an environment, as many of us were, that
Yeah.
where there was a certain amount of risk, and you kind of need to be
Yeah.
careful. So what does that mean in terms of the human nervous system? Well, it means
Oh,
that the child tends to be in a state of what's called hypervigilance. So hypervigilance
yes.
is
Yes.
simply a raised level of awareness that we employ when we feel like we're not
Right.
safe and we want to be extra watchful so we don't just miss some high risk situation that may exist in our environment that we just haven't noticed yet. So hypervigilance is a sort of a high level, excited level of nervousness or anxiety that is actually quite adaptive for us as human beings over hundreds of thousands of years when we felt like we
Right.
needed to be very careful and vigilant to see uh, any potential risks that may be out there in the environment. And
Well, Dr.
so
Murphy, I hate to interrupt, but we're going to pause for a short commercial break. When we return, Dr. Murphy will guide us through the first 4 steps for moving beyond the conditions, beliefs, and experiences we did not choose. You're listening to Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy. We'll be right back.
Mike Zorek, a 3-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy. I'm your interviewer here, Dr. Gloria Warren. Before the break, we introduced Heidegger's concept of thrownness, the recognition that every person enters a life already shaped by circumstances, culture, family, environment, beyond their control. Now we'll begin to examine how awareness and conscious choice can help us move forward. So let's look at the awakening to choice, and let's begin with step 1, recognizing inherent beliefs and patterns. Dr. Murphy, please explain what that means.
Oh, this is the fundamental one. Way back in the time of the ancient Greeks, they had um, a mentor who they would approach to seek to understand the fundamental nature of reality. And when they went to the great sage in Greece, the oracle at Delphi, and they asked, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Why are we here? And what should we try to do over the course of our lifetime? What the oracle
Mm-hmm.
said after a long period of reflection, the oracle said, "Know thyself." So knowing ourselves, understanding ourselves is sort of the first step that we need to think about in terms of really empowering ourselves to take some degree and a higher degree of mastery in our lives. So looking back on our lives and understanding where we came from and how did those factors affect us? How did they form our personality? What is the psychological and emotional baggage that we bring with us into every
Mm.
situation we encounter? We didn't create it. We just found ourselves there and were affected by it. And so knowing yourself, looking at yourself and acknowledging the strengths and weaknesses that we have uh, is really the first step in terms of empowering ourselves to be able to make choices that will be most constructive, both in terms of
Wow.
our own destiny and our ability to be of service to others.
Wow. That explains a lot about our children, even. And like myself, of growing up, I didn't want to manage money. I wanted somebody else to do that part, but I never was able to manage money when I was younger. It makes me really think I'm glad I taught my kids how to manage money. Wow,
Yeah.
it really follows suit with the environment when they're younger. I love that. So
Right. So if you know yourself, you kind of have an awareness of
right,
that from the get-go. And when you approach a relationship, you can say, hey, you can handle the money. I just really don't enjoy that. It's not a skill that I really want to create. So you do that.
right.
So you can make informed decisions about uh,
Like
the paths that you want to go down. So knowing yourself is sort of the first issue. And we don't really give a lot of attention to that consciously in our society. We just sort of
so
are
true.
told to do things, uh, get things
So
done. But yeah, go ahead.
I do have some questions here we can ask ourselves, and I thought I'd, slip this in there on you, and that's things that you can ask yourself to help you know yourself. And you can continue on with your own questions as well, like, where did I first learn this belief? Is it based on evidence, fear, or family tradition, or when something that happened when I was younger? Does it still serve my well-being today? And what happens when I behave differently? I think when you start asking questions about yourself, it helps you learn about yourself. Why don't we move on now to step 2? separate your identity from your circumstance. You know, what do you think of that?
Oh, it's the fundamental act of self-definition that I think you're talking about is, our
Okay.
identity is, essentially who we are, our personality. And that's comprised of a lot of things, but one of the fundamental parts is what we've been talking about, our
Mm-hmm.
experience, our early life experiences, what the qualities were that we experienced in our home that we grew up in, the school that we went to, the relationships that we experienced when we were very young. Those are formative. So those are the elements of our identity, and the key is to understand that we are not necessarily identified with that. We don't have to be that way. We can acknowledge those qualities, and then we can work with them to employ uh, different strategies to
Right.
manage more constructively. So separating who I happen to be influenced to
Mm.
be by virtue of my environment from who I think I can become is sort of the first step that I think you're talking about in clarifying um, our life goals and our sense of purpose.
Right. Like asking, am I broken or am I a failure? Um, did I experience failure in the past, perhaps? Or am I powerless? Maybe that's why I grew up being more of a pacifist. And because I was ignored, I was bullied in school, because I was not a popular kid. I just kept to myself, but I'm not I mean, I can be a pacifist if I want to be, but I can also stand up for what's right at the same time now because I changed it, which is great. Which brings us to step 3. Accept what cannot be changed without surrendering agency. What what do you want to fill in here with your wisdom? Like-
Well, I don't know about the wisdom. I mean, I grew up
oh
in
yeah.
a very chaotic environment and difficult environment, like almost all of us did. We boomers, this huge generation that emerged after the Second World War, and just people were struggling to survive. Lots of immigrant populations like the one that I came from. So I think part of it is as you say, the acceptance and saying, okay, it's okay for me to be who I am. So giving ourselves a sense of affirmation and acceptance that I'm okay. I'm
Mm,
okay being who I am. The way that I am and who I am has value and meaning. And so I think that that first part that you mentioned, the acceptance part, rather than being disparaging or negative in terms of how we treat ourselves. So treating ourselves with respect and consideration and compassion and love, even though we may have experienced, real challenges when we were young in our early life or external environment, like you're saying, where we grew up. Um, making the conscious choice to be supportive of ourselves and
right.
nurturing to ourselves is, the first step, I think, in going beyond, the environmental factors that influenced us.
Yeah, as well as accepting that we cannot change where we were born and some of the things that happened when we were growing up or physical limitations usually, and every loss or injustice uh, that occurred in our lives, but we still may be able to change the boundaries we establish for ourselves as we get older and the support we seek, the habits we practice, and where we go in our direction from here. This is just a few examples.
Right.
So, yeah,
One of the most significant things that research has really pointed out with regard to early life and childhood, adolescence, is how much our development is affected by the social group that we choose to hang around with. Right? So
yeah,
our choice in friends is very meaningful. And you'll
yeah,
find that kids who hang around with the kind of academically motivated, that the so-called nerds at school, well, they do better at school because, they're all their friends are studying all the time. They're talking to each other about stuff. And really the reinforcement of that stuff over time has a
yeah,
tremendous effect on the outcome and the academic success of kids who tend to associate and have a family that is more oriented in that way. For example, my mother was an English teacher. So during my childhood, she wasn't available a lot because she was working or she was going to graduate school, but my house was filled with books. And so I just accessed the books. I started reading my way through my house, the bookshelves in my house, and I discovered Proust. I discovered Hegel. I discovered all these philosophy books. I discovered poetry books, all the
How
books that we would
wonderful.
study.
How
Right.
wonderful is that? I love it.
So my home was literally kind of a library of world literature that I was able to access even as a young person. And that was just a chance opportunity
I
that was
love it.
there. And so if
Yeah.
you seize the chances that the universe has thrown at you,
Yeah.
sometimes it works out pretty well.
So let's look at step 4 here. We've only got like a minute left to this section. So decide which values generally belong to you is step 4. So you want to just enlighten us on that? Which values type, what do they mean?
Values is such an important term that we use a lot, like value. What has value? And we don't have a lot of time, but hopefully we can come back to this. Value is basically the meaning of a personal experience that we choose to invest in that experience. What do we believe
Mhm.
is right? What do we believe is good? So the choice about know thyself again is, well, what do I choose to believe is right or good or worthwhile? Those are values, and values
Mhm.
guide our behavior. And so those of
Yeah.
us who grow up with some kind of spiritual tradition, those are values, and we can choose to be guided by those values or not. And so it's just a critical issue to make conscious choices about what we believe is right and wrong in in time, and examine uh, how those choices have been influenced by our environment.
Right. And those choices may also, I know that they'll encompass things like compassion and grace, honesty, faith, creativity, courage, responsibility, service, justice, things, even forgiveness. I know that that has a lot to do with it. So, which values were assigned to me? That's something we would ask ourselves. What else could we ask ourselves?
Oh, in terms of our choices in behavior, because values are sort of the guardrails of our behaviors. So, which values are we going to determine are more central for us?
Mhm.
Some people who grow up with a deep spiritual. Um, I have a very close friend who grew up with a very deep spiritual family experience, and so he himself became deeply involved in seeking to spread those values as well. He became an
Mhm.
evangelical person who sought to spread those beliefs in what was right and what was good in the community as well. And he devoted his life to that, to basically being of
Right.
service to others in that
So
way.
we're going to pause here. I'm so sorry, but we're going to pause for another short break. When we return, we'll continue with the five um, step 5 of the 8, including conscious choice, meaning after hardship, envisioning. Stay right there, and myself and Dr. Murphy will be right back.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author author, radio show host, and coach, John M. Hawkins, reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. Today, Dr. Murphy is enlightening us on Thrownness, the unchosen life, and moving beyond. By the way, if you please like this show, share this show, and subscribe. That's going to help us keep going with this show. We do appreciate all of our viewers, and I know you'll appreciate some of these topics we're coming up with every couple of weeks. So Dr. Murphy's helped us to understand that we cannot rewrite the circumstance of our arrival, but we can examine the beliefs and identities that grew from them within ourselves. Let us continue with the remaining 4 steps. This side, this is more now on the creating a chosen future. So it's positive, and these are things we can do. So step 5, replace automatic reactions with conscious choices. Dr. Murphy, please enlighten us.
Oh, that's really the fundamental issue of human freedom, right? So we can choose to feel like our lives are externally determined, and we're kind of passive riders on this predetermined train that's carrying us from the past into the present and the future. Or we can choose to be more assertive and just say, hey, listen, I'm going to choose freedom. So choosing freedom is the first step, to say, I am going to be free. I choose to be free. I choose to take charge of my life. I choose to be responsible for my life, to be a self-responsible being. And that, I think, is just really the fundamental choice that many people struggle with, but I think is, most fundamental these days. I think so many people think, oh, the environment is determining me. I'm just a victim of circumstance. But really, we're not. We can make a conscious choice to choose freedom and to ask, well, who am I? What do I want? What do I want to do with my life? And thinking about those questions and then creating our answer to them, is fundamental to then having the opportunity to benefit from freedom in terms of
Like
our choices every day.
the automatic reaction with that conscious response is what comes to mind for me. So I know what in our discussions you had mentioned the pause process. Do you want to just mention those 5 steps to the pause process? I think the viewers could really appreciate that. I know I did.
Sure. So first and foremost is to look inside oneself and notice, what is happening inside me? Like, what is my internal state right now? So many of us don't bother to really give ourselves the attention that we
Mm.
naturally would give to another person, right? Who we are having some kind of contact with. So we need to start by noticing ourselves, see what's happening inside me, and then to actually describe that and identify the feeling and the emotion that may have been activated at any particular time, and then start to apply the skills that we have: meditation, exercise, conversation, socialization, all of those things that we can do to start to influence the emotional responses that we may have and determine, uh, more options to help ourselves to claim that freedom we were talking about, and to
Mhm.
ensure that the choices that we make really reflect the values that we have and that we want to put forward in the world. So
I
identifying
love it.
who do we want to be? Yes.
I love it. So it's notice what's inside, name that emotion, really target it, regulate using slow breath or meditation, and evaluate your first impulse when reflect on it, and then choose what response we want to use. I love that. That really is a mature way to approach the whole response of ourselves within ourselves to exhibiting an outward. Let's move on to step 6. Step 6 is create meaning from hardship and experience. Uh, what do you think about that?
Well, we are those beings, I guess, in the universe that are most able to learn from experience. So hopefully we can uh, use the information that we gather every single day in having experiences to learn better who we are and how we want to live our lives. So often the best educator is struggle, right? So sort of
Yeah,
like I think Nietzsche, the philosopher, said, "What does not kill me strengthens me." That's a famous saying.
wonderful.
So the process of encountering adversity is really the best teacher. So figuring out how is how are the experiences of my life seeking to educate me? Because when we notice what's happening to us, what our relationships are like, what how we feel that day, uh, we become more and more empowered to be able to make meaningful choices about the direction of
I
our life.
I really love the way you simplified that. That is so wonderful. Let's move on to step 7, envision the future and identify what you want. So, to take a purposeful action, what can they ask themselves?
Well, I think that question you just said, what do I want? So, really asking yourself to start to envision the kind of life that you want. I envision a life now when I have the opportunity to share wonderful conversations with people like you and your audience and seek to contribute something to the world that may be of benefit to people and have a sense of value to others. That's one of the ways that I would like to use my time on the planet here. So asking that question, how do I want to live and what do I want to do and what do I want to give is
Mhm.
the key for you know then enacting, putting that into action. Think, how can I actually do that? So all of us have made choices, you and I and many others and all the people in our audience, about what are they going to do in order to be the person that they want to be.
Right.
And defining oneself is the result of many small decisions that move in that direction.
So the meditation of looking into yourself, your dreams, your hopes, your talents and skills. So let's move on to step 8. We only have a few minutes, but I want to get through this and seek counseling or support when trauma limits present freedom. I really believe strongly in this. I really believe in workers and psychologists, and it's there for us. We need to seek it when we find the need. So, when do you feel that people should do this?
Oh, I feel that when we feel inside like there's an emotional response pattern that is not contributing to our well-being or the
Right.
best choices that we make in life. I've had close friends who served the country through military service in Vietnam, for example, and they came back very different people. They were really powerfully affected by the kinds of things that happened to them. They didn't really have much of a choice in these situations. They may have been drafted to find themselves in Southeast Asia. They find themselves in these situations that were terrifying. They may have been physically injured. So these are, when you have those experiences that are called trauma and you're subjected to them, then there are things that you can do very concretely to help with that. And that is to actually engage in behavioral forms of therapy, speak with a therapist, be involved in group
Mhm.
treatment, engage in behaviors that help you to learn how to heal from the wounds that we have, like whatever wounds we have as a result of negative experiences, to acknowledge those experiences and then engage in the caring behaviors and the responsive behaviors that will allow us to heal.
Right. So, I think I'm just going to mention some of those support venues or licensed psychological counseling, like somebody like Dr. Murphy. Trauma-informed therapy, medical evaluations may be necessary, support groups, I love them. Spiritual and pastoral care, they're there for you. Trusted relationships, healthy relationships, maybe with a friend or a family member. Crisis services, when immediate safety is at risk, they are there for you. So I wanted Dr. Murphy to mention something. He had a severe motorcycle accident, correct? You want to
Right.
tell people what you experienced?
Sure. I mean, when I was a young man, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. I had a degree in philosophy, and from the college that I went to, and so I was riding a motorcycle, and I wasn't very good at riding the motorcycle. Yes, anyone who rides a motorcycle understands there are really good motorcyclists, and then there's the rest of us. And I was certainly among the rest. And what happened is that one day I set out to go to a class, as a matter of fact, and then I guess I ran into a truck. So when you run into a truck on a motorcycle, the motorcycle loses, and the human body continues in the air. And so, very long story short, I was comatose for a week or so, and I realized after I came back, and I had a very sort of interesting spiritual experience in returning from unconsciousness. I had an image of a high school coach of mine saying, "Get up, Murphy. Nobody can hold you. Nobody can hold you. Get up." And so I got up. And that's the moment at which my consciousness appeared to return to my
Mm.
body. So I had one of those near death experiences where you're gone and then you come back. And I came back and I've been here since that time. And so, but what I learned as a result of that very, I guess, traumatic event is to make good choices, to learn to, I realized I needed to stop worrying so much about what I was doing, the details of which or path I might go down, and choose a path and go down it. And so I did. I sold all my stuff eventually. I went to a doctoral program in Texas, loved that program, became a psychologist, and developed a whole path of service uh, to our community in
Oh,
many areas
that's
since then.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So we need to take another commercial break, our final commercial break. You won't want to miss this last quarter, because this last quarter, not only the impact of the motorcycle accident that Dr. Murphy experienced, but it's a conversation to the deeper nature of consciousness and your personal perceptions. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player, What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Welcome back to our final segment of Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy. Our topic, Thrownness, the Unchosen Life, 8 Steps to Move Beyond. Well, we've looked at the 8 steps to move beyond. Now, Dr. Murphy is going to discuss the nature of consciousness. Conscious is the capacity to experience awareness, including awareness of thoughts, emotions, sensations, and surroundings. But Dr. Murphy has some intriguing questions we can ask ourselves. Dr. Murphy, can you elaborate on those questions, please?
So one of the things, going back to the motorcycle accident for just a sec, there's this instrument called the Glasgow Coma Scale. So if our readers Googled GLAS, I think it's KOW, Glasgow Coma, COMA scale. It basically is a tool that describes how conscious we are. So when we think of what defines us as human beings, it really is the level of consciousness that we have and that we're able to develop and that we're able to employ in the course of managing our lives and making our decisions about what we do. So one of the things that I realized in the course of the motorcycle accident is that I went from being conscious to being unconscious, comatose, and then I came back. At a certain moment, I came back and I am conscious again. And what does that mean? Well, it means not only being awake, but knowing that you're awake. So we as human beings have this capacity for what we call self-consciousness, self-awareness. Not only can we be awake, but we know that we're awake. And that's a unique quality of human beings. So understanding that capacity for self-observation and using that capacity for self-observation to make choices as we go forward. And as I said, when I did finally wake up and realize, hey, I'm awake again, and not only am I awake, but I know I'm awake, well, I really need to make some choices, some good choices about where I want to go from here. And I think that's, once again, as you were saying before, those choices are guided by our values or our dreams and our talents. And we have the ability to sort of then move on. So I think it really is the fundamental way that this unique quality of us as human beings to not only be conscious, but know that we're conscious empowers us to guide our lives in ways that will be fulfilling for us in the long run.
I think that's an amazing, you just put that in a nice little package. Thank you.
Yeah,
It sounded to me though that you actually, it took that, I know I'm going to be a little
that's
crass
good.
here, took that
Go ahead.
knock on the head to put you on that right path. So maybe there was a purpose for that accident and made you realize. And I've heard time and time again, people who have had a major incident in their life and as well as like a near-death experience that actually changed their life and their path. It like pushed them onto another path, and then they actually did something very constructive with their life that was amazing, just like
Yeah,
it's
and that's, yeah,
it didn't go to waste. That's for
right.
sure.
That knock on the head did not go to
Yeah,
waste. And when I woke up, I realized it sort of took that knock on the head for me to realize, hey, don't worry so much about which direction you're going in. Just think of the best one and go
right.
generally in the right direction. So if you're going generally in the right direction, if you want to go north and you go sort of northwest or sort of northeast, but you're generally going north, you're going to get there eventually. It may take a little
Right.
longer, but as long as you make a choice and generally go in a direction that you believe is healthy and constructive for you and for your loved ones, that's that's the key. And sort of really allowing yourself and giving yourself permission to make the choices in the service of your own education and development and learning that we all need to take in the course of our lifetime. And that was the one for me that really determined, my path. And I'm where I am
Mhm.
now, having done whatever things I've accomplished over the course of my lifetime, my relatively long lifetime at this point, only because of that moment, that impact and that change, that learning experience, if you will. And so all of us just looking at our lives and realizing that adversity and being sensitive to the messages that we're getting in terms of our lives. Like when something happened, it's actually a message from the universe in some way that's saying, move ahead, go ahead in that direction. That's right. Or maybe
Yeah.
it's saying, no, you shouldn't do that. Stop
It's
wasting time.
time.
It's time to do
That's what
something.
it's telling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
It's
You're
time
ready.
to move on.
It's time to
This
move
just
on.
is not working for you anymore.
Yes.
Dr. Murphy, can you tell people how they can get a hold of you if they wish to speak with you or make an appointment?
So I'm very, very happy to have people like and subscribe uh, to this channel. They can reach these webcasts and a lot of other material on my website at psychologicalinvestigations.com. That's psychologicalinvestigations.com. If you just go there, you'll find lots of the writings that I've done, lots of uh, the access to podcasts, and
Hmm.
as well as my phone number and email address as well. So it'll be easy to get in touch with me, and I look forward to talking to people whenever they want to.
Wonderful. So we are thrown into a life we did not choose, but we are not condemned to live it without meaning or forever. The past may explain where we began, but awareness, courage, as well, and purposeful choice can help determine where we go from here. Thank you, Dr. Murphy, for a wonderful show. And thank you to everyone who joined us for Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy. Remember, you may not have chosen the beginning of your story, but you can become a conscious partner in its next chapter. Until next time, have a good evening.
This has been Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy. This program is provided for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace the advice of licensed mental health professionals. Always consult a qualified provider regarding your individual needs. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911 or seek immediate emergency assistance. This is Holistic Psychology with Dr. Michael Murphy. Interviewed by Dr. Gloria Warren.